What are the ongoing World Bank projects in Montenegro?
We have actually a relatively comprehensive portfolio. As you know, Montenegro became a member of the World Bank only in January 2007, and our representation here started in June 2007. There were a number of projects that preceded the independence of Montenegro, and those were mainly in the areas of strengthening institutions in the health system, in education, and pensions. Since we have included a number of projects in the areas trying to support sustainable growth and development, including in tourism, the regional waterworks, the sanitary landfill. We've added to that projects aimed at strengthening the situation in the area of energy, energy efficiency, and more lately in agriculture, in land administration, cadastre. So generally, these are all projects that are to support Montenegro in its efforts to successfully make the transition towards a free market economy, to be able to successfully compete in the global marketplace, especially in those sectors where it has comparative advantages.
How has the global financial crisis impacted the work of World Bank globally, and how do you expect it will impact your work in Montenegro in the next 3 to 5 years?
The fallout from the global financial crisis affects, of course, the World Bank, and I think the way where the government of Montenegro sees our most valuable contribution in its effort to deal with the crisis. As you know, the growth projections by both the World Bank and the IMF for 2009 are negative for the world as a whole for the first time ever in the last 60 years. And against this very dire background, I think the one positive news that we have seen recently is the fact that one global consensus seemed to be emerging. We've seen it during the G20 meetings in London just a few days ago, and I'm sure that will be reconfirmed during the spring meetings of the IMF and the World Bank in just a few weeks. Namely, a global crisis needs a global response. Against this background, there was an attempt being made to agree on a set of comprehensive measures that was supposed to provide global players with a global set of rules, whether it is financial sector supervision and monitoring, but also in attempting to enhance national governments' ability to enforce their own national tax laws. I think this has been a very positive development in trying to create a consensus and a joint course of actions to counter the worst effects of this crisis. This is work in progress. Many decisions have not been made, and the natural follow-up to these discussions, also in response to the precise role that the World Bank is supposed to play generally and most particularly here in Montenegro, I think we will see in the context of the spring meetings during April 25th, 26th. I expect that the principal decisions where we go from here will be made there, and those decisions being made there, I think, will very clearly and directly affect what we will do here over the next 3 to 5 years.
We have been hearing that one potential response to final crisis by the Montenegrin government might be potential loan from IMF. In your opinion, how might this loan impact the citizens of Montenegro, and what are the most likely segments of the discretionary part of the government's budget that might need to be cut?
And should the government decide to go this route, the way it typically starts is there will be a joint stock taking by the IMF together with the Ministry of Finance and the Central Bank in particular of the actual situation that they were faced with and the perspective for the rest of the year. Typically in the first step, both teams will look at the first quarter results of particularly revenue collection, trying to assess and analyze together what is the most realistic projection for the rest of the year. In the second step, one will look at what are the fiscal obligations, those that are already included in the budget and those that will come on top of those as a result of the impact of the crisis. Then in a third step, one determines what is a budget deficit that for macroeconomic purposes can be defendable, and at the same time what the government can finance, including from external sources. Those three elements together will result in an assessment of the depth of the fiscal adjustment that is needed to make this all work. Clearly, in a discussion like this, all the various aspects are on the table, whether it's adjustment in current expenditures, in public infrastructure and tax policy. But the ultimate policy mix, of course, will have to be decided by the two parties, the IMF and the government, and neither has a decision been made, nor have negotiations been started, and thirdly, I'm neither the IMF nor the government, so it is a little premature to discuss the various elements that might be part of such a program. Clearly, there was a large number of programs that the IMF has recently had with countries in Central and Eastern Europe, including Serbia, and looking at those documents, I think gives you a certain idea in which direction these negotiations would go.
Jeffrey Sachs last week wrote a piece for the London's Guardian where he appeals to the developed countries to assist the developing world in following through with large development projects as one short-term response to crises that would also affect of the long-term development. Issues like safer roads, urban and intercity public transportations, water, irrigation, etc. In Montenegro, one such project might be the Bar-Boljare highway. In your opinion, how will this project impact the Montenegrin economy during its implementation?
In principle, I would say this highway project, with all its tunnels and bridges, would be able to contribute in a very substantial manner to the efforts by government to secure economic growth and foster employment. There's no doubt about that, and so that general suggestion, I think, goes in the right direction. But we have to be realistic. The most important consequence of this crisis is, of course, the lack of liquidity that we're facing not only here but internationally, which causes problems for the government but also for firms to secure financing. At this point, I do not see advanced economies or even multilateral institutions willing and able to finance this project. That, of course, leaves now the government, together with the top-ranked consortium, to negotiate, probably line by line, the various possible and available financing mechanisms. If this can be resolved in a satisfactory manner, with undue risks for either side of this deal, the rest of this project clearly would be very, very positive for growth, for employment, and generally for the socio-economic development potential of Montenegro.